and welcome to Games Hack. God, we're doing another one of these where we're playing these awful games.
Why do we do these stupid episodes? I mean, who really likes to watch bad games?
I don't know, but at least you guys won't have to play them after you watch us play them, and you'll only be subjected to a minute or two of them. So
yes, and they'll all be for sale after we're done with them.
Not true, because he's a collector. Anyway, why don't you kick it off with some awesome, great game?
Here it comes. Brace yourself. Blaster Master 2 for the Genesis is the sequel to Blaster Master on the NES. I don't have to tell you which version is better, as I'm sure we all already know. If you don't know, then you can put 2 and 2 together and figure out why I'm talking about Blaster Master 2 in a bad game episode. The first game on the NES was purely awesome. All aspects of the game were perfect, from the control to the graphics to the music. Its only downfall was no password system. Blaster Master 2 starts off on the wrong foot, as it wasn't developed by Sunsoft. They let Software Creations tackle this game. The end result is your average Western-developed game for the time, and that's not good. So, in this type of game there are 3 types of levels. The side-scrolling tank levels are the meat of the gameplay, and they're not even very exciting to play. The tank control's okay, but not perfect. Jason can hop in and out of the tank to explore on his own, which is still a cool aspect. The overhead tank levels are horrible. The control of your tank is bad, as it feels like it's on ice. You need to manually rotate the turret with the B and C buttons, and it's not very accurate. These levels take a very long time if you want to take minimal damage. Then there's the side-scrolling Jason levels, which are short and reserved for the bosses and mini-bosses. Control here is good for the most part. Graphically, the game looks fairly good and has some nice colors for a Genesis game. The music is horrendous. I hate to compare it to the first game, but that's my only reference point. The melodies are super repetitious and sound god-awful on the Genesis. They didn't even remix any of the original music, which would have made the enjoyment of this game go up a couple of notches. But then again, if the sound quality on those remixes were this bad, maybe not. I'm sorry, but Sunsoft and Software Creations, you guys ruined Blaster Master with this sequel.
I've had car accidents that were more entertaining than time killers on the Genesis. It's a one-on-one fighting game based on an arcade game. Of course, since Mortal Kombat and its over-the-top violence was so popular, the developers had to try and cash in on that, so we get games like this. You pick a character and off you go to kill people from a bunch of different points in time, I think. There's blood all over the place and each warrior has their own weapon. In this game, you can chop each other's limbs off as you fight. Lose a limb? No big deal, just keep on fighting like it was nothing. People keep trying to desperately win the match even when they only have their legs left. But don't worry, anyone who loses something gets it back on the next match. The control is kind of weird. Each button controls an individual limb, and even your head. It's actually kind of like Tekken in that sense, but don't get your hopes up, it's not that good. You can do stronger attacks. Pressing 2 arms together, for example, will make for a stronger hit, but the control really doesn't work well at all. You don't feel like you can do much of anything. In fact, I wasn't even able to figure out any of the special moves. The enemy sure did, though. Both the graphics and the sound feel like the Genesis is about to run out of gas and die. The entire game seems as if it were made by high school kids just trying to shock people. Well, they succeeded, but for all the wrong reasons. The character selection is bad, the stages are bad, the control is bad, everything is bad. The only thing it really has going for it is the excessive violence, and even that gets old pretty quick. There's really not much more to say about time killers, and I tried.
South Park on the Nintendo 64 is a first-person adventure game. All 4 kids are here and selectable, and at times you can even switch between them on the fly. Looking at the game, the first thing you notice is the horrible draw distance. You feel like you're playing the game in some super cloudy or smoky place, as you can barely see 100 yards in front of your character. Also, I know that the characters you control are kids, but I feel like I'm playing about 6 inches off the ground. A little bit more height would have been nice. So, most of the levels are made up of you walking from point A to point B. Along the way, you kill hordes of enemies. This is where the problems start. The levels feel very forced, as if the developer tried to lengthen the levels by adding tons of enemies to kill. It honestly feels like all filler and no substance. I never felt that I really wanted to go further in the level to see what was next. I knew exactly what was next. Another round of shooting with the exact same enemy. There's very little variation in this game. The next problem is when they actually use sound bites for the game characters. At first it's actually kind of funny, but it really doesn't take long for them to become extremely annoying. You'll quickly want to turn the volume down all the way just to stop hearing those sound bites. But you'll be okay with that because the music sucks too. The theme of the cartoon is arranged with the background music, and the style of the music just doesn't fit the game at all. The only good thing this game has going for it is the control. Using the N64 controller actually works really well here, and it's a comfortable setup. Overall though, this is a really bad game, and you'd be wise to skip this one.
Well met, dumbass. Man, these clones are stupid. Dude, this is great.
No Escape by Bits Corporation for the Genesis is a crappy side-scrolling action platformer based on a smash hit movie starring Ray Liotta. Right away you'll find yourself overwhelmed by enemies, and defeating them is really tough. They just keep respawning over and over, so your only option really is just to run through the stage as fast as you can. Then you get to the first boss and he takes a lot more hits than you do. The problem here is that the control is really slow and unresponsive, and it's almost impossible to avoid enemy attacks. Anyway, you get past these first few areas and now you can select where you want to go next. And that's kinda cool, I suppose. But really, I don't want to go to any of these stages, they all suck. You face a ton of really tough enemies as well as traps within the stage itself. Many of the jumps are really difficult because you have to be in a precise location to get up on a nearby ledge. As you run around the stages, you'll collect random items. You can see these and even select them if you press the C button to go into an inventory screen, but you can't do anything with them. Instead, you're supposed to keep them and then go to a village where you can trade them for other items with various characters. The trading system is far from elegant, but you'll need to do this in order to disable some of the traps within a stage. The graphics are okay, if a little dark, and the music is actually kind of good in spots. But that doesn't fix the awful control and the boring, frustrating gameplay. Don't bother with this one. Oh, and there's also a Super Nintendo version, and yes, it sucks too. Hell, maybe even worse because it has to load at the start of each level. Oh man, and we're only about halfway done through the episode and we got more crap to look at.
This episode sucks. I even hate it.
Yeah, well that's because you're in it. Anyway.
It's not even funny. I'm the bright, shining moment of this episode.
If you say so. Anyway, let's take a look at more bad games.
Revolution X.
I'd like to talk about Revolution X on the Genesis briefly, but I'm not going to go into a ton of detail because I'm sure this game has its fans for whatever reason, but I don't like it. It's a light gun game where you can't use a light gun. You can shoot bullets, CDs, and the C button speeds up your crosshair while you hold it down. The goal of the game is to rescue the band Aerosmith.
What the?
Why anyone would actually want to rescue Aerosmith is beyond me.
If you're watching this, then they've taken over.
The gameplay is okay, but the graphics are pretty grainy. The music is awful. And honestly, I'm not sure if that's actually Aerosmith music or not. But as bad as this game is, the Super Nintendo version is even worse. It may appear better at first because it has some cool scaling during the gameplay, but the graphics are generally really dark and undetailed. Also, the control of your crosshair is really bad. You no longer have the speed up button, it's really twitchy and imprecise. It does have some real Aerosmith sound samples though, but they do sound pretty muffled. Are they singing about cigarettes?
Next up is Contra Force for the NES. Originally called Arkhound in Japan and cancelled before it was released, this game only saw the light of day in the USA and was adapted as a Contra game. Instead of fighting aliens this time around, you are fighting a crime syndicate. You pick one of 4 characters of a task force and set off to clean up Neo City. In all reality, this game should have been cancelled for the USA also. It definitely feels like they didn't finish the development process and released a broken game. Your characters control okay for the most part, but it's missing one huge aspect that was in previous Contra games. You can't shoot down diagonally while running. You can do it when you jump and it works, but this adds an extra step to something that was there before and now is taken away. This is very frustrating as there are lots of areas where I want to shoot down while running, but I can't. But my main complaint is the broken flow of the game. At times the screen won't advance and you find yourself at the edge of the screen waiting for it to scroll. And when it does finally decide to scroll, you find yourself going back and forth until your character is centered again. And the enemies and objects aren't even always in the same place. For some reason, the game forgets to place enemies down, and it's always a treat wondering if an enemy will be in a certain spot or not. The game is also plagued by slowdown, and at times you find yourself wondering if the game is just going to freeze completely. Instead of shooting icons out of the sky for different weapons, this time they borrowed a Gradius-style system. You collect briefcases, and when the weapon you want becomes highlighted, you hit select, and it's yours to use until you die. Even if it's just grenades, you have them until you die and cannot go back to a gun. Just brilliant. The music is okay, it definitely has the Konami sound to it, and has a slight resemblance to Contra styling. But overall, this game is a wreck, and doesn't deserve the great name of Contra.
When anyone mentions Hudson Soft, you can't help but think about Bill Laimbeer's Combat Basketball for the Super Nintendo. It was designed and programmed by Bill Laimbeer himself while he was sitting on the bench after being fouled out in any given Detroit Pistons game. It takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where Bill Laimbeer has conquered the planet and decreed that all video games must suck, starting with this one. It's an overhead basketball game, and that in itself is rather odd. You can check your opponents at any time without worrying about being fouled for it. Unfortunately, the entire game revolves around this as it's the only defensive move you really have. The only button that does anything is B. If you're holding the ball and you press it, you throw the ball away. I still can't figure out how to shoot a basket. It's damned hard, and I've got to admit that after a few hours playing, I still have never scored a single point in this game. I've tried tapping the button, holding it, aiming with the D-pad, nothing works. Oh, and let's not forget that there are bombs and other random things all over the court to help you despise the game even more. The control is really sluggish, but the game does run at the Super Nintendo's top speed as you can see, so that's pretty impressive. Good job, Super Nintendo. The graphics are pretty minimal with nothing really worth mentioning. The music is actually kind of nice and never really bothered me despite having only one musical selection during gameplay. But really, I haven't played a lot of basketball video games. However, out of the dozen or so that I've played on various 16-bit systems, this one is by far the worst. Avoid this game even if it means stepping off the sidewalk into traffic.
Arrow the Acrobat is another attempt to make a multi-platform mascot that didn't turn out very well. Developed by Iguana Entertainment, this was released on both the Super Nintendo and Genesis and later on the Game Boy Advance. It's the same game for the most part. The levels are the same in each game, but you'll notice that the background has slightly different colors in each version. The control in each version is pretty bad. It's not impossible, but it can be very frustrating to control Arrow. You have a spin attack that you use to kill some enemies and also to do kind of a double jump to get to higher places. The problem here is that the move only works diagonally. It would have been nice to be able to do this move straight up and down, but that apparently never occurred to the developers. Also, the field of vision, well, to me it seems limited. Hiding just beyond the edge of the screen are usually spikes and areas you wish you could see just before you commit to go in that direction. Well, sure, there is a look button, but why tack that on instead of just giving us some more room to look at the edge of the screen? Plus, the game itself is rather uninspired. On some levels, you need to jump on a bunch of star platforms for no reason or to do other meaningless tasks. It's slow, clunky, and not fun at all. The music is really bad. All the melodies are rearranged circus tunes, which are bad enough even at a real circus. The sound on the Super Nintendo is better than the Genesis. Well, it's not good, it's just less irritating. The only cool thing about this game is the bonus level in the Super Nintendo version. You have to dive into a pool from a way high up platform. The Super Nintendo version is a ripoff of the parachute game in Pilot Wings, minus the parachute. It is literally the same as you guide your character through rings and ultimately dive into a pool. The Genesis version is laughable, as you just dive blindly from a 2D platform and hope you hit the pool at the bottom. Aero the Acrobat is not a fun game by any means, but if you have to have it, go for the Super Nintendo version as it's slightly better in all aspects.
Finally, we have night creatures on a TurboGrafx 16. At the start of the game, you're just wandering around randomly and suddenly get bitten by a bat. A vampire then shows up to tell you that you're doomed to become one of them. Even your girlfriend won't come near you. But the bats and the rats, boy, do they really want to touch you. I mean, damn, they just keep coming and coming. It's impossible not to get hit, but fortunately, they all drop a lot of stuff to restore your vitality. To me, this almost seems like an apology from the developers. Hey, we're sorry we couldn't properly program some decent gameplay mechanics, so here, take all of this vitality because it's the only way to stay alive thanks to our shoddy programming. Anyway, you get to a woman who says you need to find and defeat the bat that bit you before dawn or you'll become a night creature. Oh no. So you set off to fight everything else you see, and it isn't easy. The collision detection is just awful and the controls are far less than responsive. But you can adapt, kind of, and make some progress. One nice thing about this game, maybe the only nice thing, is that it's non-linear. You can choose to go wherever you want, pretty much whenever you want. But be careful about entering certain areas before getting specific weapons and powers. You will regret it. After you defeat a boss, you earn the ability to morph into an animal, just like the Sega Smash hit Altered Beast. But being an animal form constantly depletes your life, so that takes away a lot of the fun. Sometimes people will randomly give you a cool item. Take my goods, foul creature of the night. Thanks, I think. It goes without saying that the graphics are pretty abysmal with next to no detail or shading. You can definitely tell it's Western developed. The one good thing is the multi-layered scrolling, which you don't see too often on the Turbo. The music tries to be scary, but to me it's almost humorous. The sound quality, however, is pretty low. Add all of this up and you get a really tough game that's incompetently made. It's almost so bad that it's good. I'd still rather play this than most of the other games in this episode, though. Yeesh.
All right, there you go. An episode of the cream of the crap games out there.
Yep. And I know we didn't talk about games like Superman 64. I know you guys think it's the worst game in the world. That it may be. But, you know, I don't really want that game touching my Nintendo 64. I don't want to have to play it for this episode.
Plus, why should we rehash that same old game that everybody who's already reviewed it would just be saying the same exact thing that they would be saying?
Exactly. So. I mean, you know, we're showing you different crappy games that perhaps you didn't know were so crappy or even existed.
And if you like them, why? Why do you like them?
Yeah, come on. Anyway, thanks for watching GameSack.
Joe,
What?
I've got some bad news. I don't know how to say this to you, but
What now? Jeez.
you know, I've been really just not liking video games lately, and it's just stupid. I've just come to the point where I just don't like them at all anymore.
Any of them?
No, so we're gonna have to cut the show off. I just don't want to do this anymore. I'm gonna take my whole game collection down to the thrift store and just give it away because it's just
Give it away.
It's worthless. It's a stupid hobby. So if any of you guys are in the Denver area, you know, go down to the thrift store and we can pick up some quality stuff for
Well,
probably
it's
cheap.
interesting that you say that because I'm kind of getting tired of video games myself. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like, you know, the Genesis stuff, but they don't make games for the Genesis anymore. So
yeah.
what the hell am I doing playing video games? I can't live in this PS3 world. That's just insane. I'm just too scared with all the newfangled stuff they're coming out with.
Yeah, I'm so happy you said that.
Yeah.
It makes me feel so much
Yeah.
better. I was worried you were going to have a huge fit. And
Yeah,
just-
maybe we could pick up some books or something while we're down
Yeah,
at
a
the
new
thrift store.
hobby.
Yeah. April Fools.